From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford, and I believe in America. I believe in you. And most importantly, I believe our greatest days are still ahead. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the legislation, the news of the day. And we also meet the great folks I'm working with to help shape our great nation. One of those remarkable individuals is Katie Fetzer, from right here in the 4th Congressional District of Missouri, a dedicated child advocate and entrepreneur. Katie works tirelessly to combat child exploitation and sex trafficking, which is a huge issue here in the Midwest. She's trying to raise awareness and to provide some practical solutions. She's staying in the fight for America's children through Empower the Fight. It's a grassroots nonprofit started by her and a group of Kansas City moms. Working together, Empower the Fight empowers adults to prevent and stop child exploitation, helping more citizens serve as the front line of defense for children. Please welcome to our district office, Katie Fetzer. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You're originally from Texas, right?
Yes, absolutely.
How'd you get to Missouri?
Oh, that's kind of a long story with twists and turns, but basically it was employment and then different opportunities to work with different nonprofits. So,
what got you involved in fighting for children and stopping child exploitation?
Well, it initially started on the front lines nearly 10 years ago. I just felt really pulled into starting to work with foster care. And I started fostering children and just started jumping in and going, how can I help? I was just an everyday mom. No real aspirations to ever become a victim advocate. I mean, I knew as a survivor and as someone who had been through difficult levels of difficulty during childhood that it was important to have a safe adult. So we just jumped right into fostering, and man, oh man, did we find ourselves on the front lines. For some reason, almost every case that I handled when I was fostering and also eventually became a court-appointed advocate was children connected to sex trafficking. And that shocked me. That was something.
Some of the kids that you were fostering had been trafficked sexually?
Yes, they had been. And or their parents were actively connected to the trafficking rings and to the drug trafficking and the sex trafficking rings. So we were like literally thrown into the front lines of going, wait a minute, this isn't a world away. It's here. It's literally in our backyards. We cared for children who were brought in who had been actively trafficked, and helped to claim.
How does a child become trafficked as a sex slave almost?
Yeah, well, it's not like the movies. The majority of the time here in the United States, it's children are trafficked by someone they know. Over 80% of the time, it's either a parent, a relative, a boyfriend, someone that they know, an aunt, an uncle that actually start trafficking them. In that particular situation, the first situation that we had where it was very clearly trafficking, it was a parent and the parent's boyfriend that were...
Why would they do that?
Well, why does evil exist, right? So there are people that...
Is it for money?
Yeah, it's for money. It's for drugs. It's for all of it. There are vile, horrible people in this world that want to do vile, horrible things to children, and they will pay money for it. They will pay for it through drugs. They will pay for it through cash. It's a sobering reality. We have a major sex addiction problem in the United States. We have a major child sex abuse problem in the United States. It's very large. Trafficking is only about 10 to 12% of the bigger story, which is child sex abuse in the United States. It is a epidemic. And when we are seeing, why is trafficking exist? Why do these things happen? Well, we know statistically the vast majority of traffickers were horribly sexually abused as children. So then all of these different emotions that we normally have of empathy, of all of that is just completely crushed. And so then you end up having this cycle, this destructive. We know a third of child sex abuse victims actually become perpetrators themselves. And that's a sobering reality. The miracle in that is that 2/3 don't. 2/3 say it stops with me.
But why, if you're so hurt by that, as I'm sure an individual is, why would you turn to be the perpetrator and subject other children, God's creation, to this horrible.
It's a gradual issue. Most people don't understand, but most people don't wake up and just decide they're going to be horrible people. It is a gradual process. It is micro decisions that add up to become a macro problem. And those micro decisions of compromise, of a little bit of a harm or this or that, and then all of a sudden this callousness of the human heart begins to occur a little bit over time. And then you wake up and you literally have a monster, full-blown narcissist most often, with no form of empathy. And they didn't start off that way. They have evolved that way. And that's why it's really important for us to understand the fragility of humanity, to understand that we're all vulnerable. Like we need to realize we don't wake up, like most people don't wake up intending to harm. It starts out innocent. 90% of harm is unintentional. That's where it starts. And then when the unintentional harm happens and maybe they get by with it, then it escalates and then it goes from there. And then you'll find most perpetrators often have had gradual harm that then escalated into purposeful harm that was minor, and then it escalates into something as severe as trafficking.
What age does it start with young people?
What do you mean, the victims or the perpetrator?
Yes, the victim.
The average age that we see the most common is for girls and boys is around the same. There's some debate among experts, but between the ages of 7 and 9, most often it's 7 for girls, 9 for boys. That's the average overall. But a child can be a victim at any age. So like the children that were the first case we had with trafficking, they were toddlers.
Toddlers?
Yes. Here in Missouri. This is not a world away. This is here.
How bad is the problem in Missouri?
It's bad. Like, it's everywhere. It's probably not as bad as, like, some of we know, like, trafficking's really bad on the southern states. Here, it's a little bit different, but we have major interstates that come in through Missouri. It's the center of the country. There's a major transport. We have a lot of drugs flowing through Missouri like crazy. And the thing that people don't understand is that we think that sex trafficking, especially of children, would be obvious. So what we teach, like in classes for people who go through our training, is that sex trafficking is actually covered by a mask called drug trafficking. So when we have drug trafficking going on in our country, unhinged without any restraint, you're always going to have sex trafficking right along with it. Because often it's the same channels, it's the same networks that are doing both hand in hand. And you need drugs to make children complicit, especially at first.
They give these kids drugs?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's how it starts. Like, it's often for like a teenager who starts, dating somebody or starting to use recreational drugs, and then they actually get into a situation where they've done drugs, it's then compromised them so they can't resist a sexual assault, and then they're sexually assaulted, and then there's now an addiction that's being created within the victim. So now they need the pimp who was also supplying their drugs, and then it becomes this really toxic thing. But it starts out as a romance. It starts out as an enticement of, hey, let me love you.
For the perpetrator?
No, the perpetrator is trying to romance and entice the victim. So it's called grooming. There's 7 stages of grooming.
What are those 7 stages, Tina?
The first one is, I can't recall it right off the top of my head, but one of the first ones is actually meeting a need, or showing affection, like gifts and love. Like, those are the top 2 normal stages of grooming. And then it goes into educating, and they begin to actually educate the victim on sexuality and normalize sexual content. So in the old days, that was
pornography?
Yeah, through pornography, through discussion, jokes, movies. And it's a way to numb, especially a child, that what they may feel wrong is okay and acceptable. That's why having not education, but sex material in the schools that is grotesque and not from an education basis. I personally, as a parent, don't want the school system
because it desensitizes.
Yes, absolutely. So basically what we're seeing in the schools is we're seeing the schools mass groom our children through the sexual content.
In the name of education.
In the name of education.
That's sick.
It is sick. And in this next stage after education and normalization of sexual content, there's normally an introduction of drugs right along with that. So in our schools, when you see an influx of drugs, the drugs in the schools are off the charts. We're having so many reports of teachers telling us that there's drugs throughout the schools. Fentanyl is often found. I've talked to teachers who have to use gloves just to search a student's backpack because there's so much fentanyl in the schools. So then drugs and education, or not education, but desensitization of sexual content is the 6th stage of grooming. The very next stage is actual assault, sexual assault.
Katie, we've got to take a break. A fascinating conversation with Katie Fetzer, Empower the Fight. We're talking about how do we save a generation of children from human sex trafficking, and it's happening right here in Missouri. Heavy topic, but we got to talk about it. Stay with us. Mark Alford's America continues after this. Welcome back to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington and let you meet some of the folks I'm working with to help shape our great nation. Today, though, we are in the district, in the great 4th Congressional District of the great state of Missouri, and we're talking with Katie Fetzer, who is a tireless child advocate, founder of Empower the Fight. We're talking about a very dark, deep, I think satanic topic, human sex trafficking of children as young as toddler age. And how is this hidden? Because the average person who lives in an average house in Missouri and goes about and shops at Hy-Vee and Price Chopper and is busy throughout their day, they don't see this. I guess there's scales on my eyes. I do not see this happening in our society. Why is that?
Well, part of it is it doesn't look like we see in the movie. So we're looking for the wrong thing. We're looking for kids that are caged. We're looking for obvious signs that kids are dirty from top to bottom and that they have signs of being severely sexually assaulted. And that's just not the way the majority of the time it looks in the United States. Are those one-off situations and do those things occur? Yeah, occasionally. Yeah, time to time. But statistically, that is not the common way it looks. So we have a whole group of citizens that are looking for the wrong thing. That's one of the ways it stays hidden. The other thing is that we need to understand is that because it doesn't look like that, what does it look like? Well, it looks like the hidden chains of severe psychological abuse. Majority of kids that find themselves in the throes of sex trafficking or severe, consistent and ongoing sexual abuse, these children are under severe psychological control. So they're still going to school. They're still living at home most often while all of these things are happening. And so that's where we're really passionate and Empower the Fight is in these topics, it feels so hopeless, right? It feels like, oh my gosh, what are the solutions? We can't change the border except through voting and doing that part of it as citizens. So what as citizens can we do? Well, the first thing we can do is learn. And that's the thing that Empower the Fight we're so passionate about is empowering parents, empowering citizens to be the front line of defense for children and have a heavy emphasis in prevention and intervention and not wait until things get so escalated and that there's a problem. They can go to our website and our trainings online, and we also do in-person trainings throughout the community.
And what is that website?
It's empowerthefight.org or stopchildexploitation.org.
For now, though, tell us what we should be looking for.
Right now, the main thing that we really teach people to look for is to look at children's eyes first. If you see a child's eyes be really dark, not engaging, lifeless, they don't engage with you. They don't engage in eye contact, and they act afraid to talk to you. Like that is one of the first indicators we teach people to look for. It gets in a little bit more complex, but that is one of the top tips Most people look for physical indicators of dirty and things like that. And most often that's not the way they look. You will see a child withdrawn with their eyes down, their head down, and they're totally disengaged. That's one of the first indicators. If you have children, if you have teenagers especially, but children that are rebellious or behavioral or are acting out a lot, that is a child's only way to tell us there's a problem, right? And so those are things to engage in. And this is really important, and it's what we teach throughout training, is be quick to observe and slow to conclude. And you can open your eyes as a citizen, and you can observe something quickly and not make a conclusion of what's going on in that situation and try to get other people involved that are more experts or go through the training yourself so that you know how to take the steps to make an assessment.
So what do you do if you recognize a child in that situation?
You immediately call the police and you say, I see a child, like say you're in a grocery store and I see a child and I'm concerned. We actually teach in training, we teach people how to engage with a child so that they could, maybe it's just a child that's having a bad day. And how do you help walk through that and not jump to a conclusion? But for listeners who haven't been through our training, if you are ever concerned that a child is in danger, call the police.
They'll do a welfare check?
They'll do a welfare check. In a public setting, it's a little bit harder. But most often in communities, we have people that are afraid to get involved in messes. And what people need to understand is when we choose not to engage and get involved, this is how the horrors of sex trafficking and child sex abuse actually can live in our country. We bought the lie to turn our head away and then it's not our problem, or there's, quote, an agency for that. Well, even of the children that are reported through official hotlines, 3% of those enter foster care. 97% of those children are still on their own. So we need citizens that are empowered. We need citizens that are educated, that are aware of what is going on, what the risks to children are, and what can we do. And that's something that we're so passionate about, because how do we move the needle of change? We know that a response-driven method is not cutting it. We've had this method for decades, and the problem only continues to get worse no matter how much money and resources we throw at it. So why are we not doing the other side of it and really going, how do we prevent this? How do we empower our citizens? How do we empower them to engage and safeguard and protect? How does evil work?
So it's almost like a training class that you put people through to be
Absolutely.
able to recognize this evil. For people who've not grown up seeing this firsthand, it's like a whole another language that you're trying to learn.
Yeah, in some ways it is. And basically what we're training people to do is to open their eyes. And how do you engage appropriately when you see something that's going wrong? And then what do you do about it? That's what we answer through training. But the biggest thing, I would say the top thing, is be engaged and trust your gut. Don't turn off those gut instincts. If you know that something in your gut is wrong, do not ignore that. Engage and do everything you can to protect that child. Maybe it's something as simple as there's a coach and you just don't feel in your gut something feels wrong. You don't have to go around and start telling everybody this dude is bad because you don't know. But can you create safeguards between that coach and your children? You better believe it. You can.
God's given you that intuition for a reason.
Yes, and stop turning it off. And we need to go back to the basics of listen to your gut.
If someone wants to get involved with your organization, how do they do that? How do they get training? How do they help you help save children?
Yeah, they can go to empowerthefight.org. We have everything on there about ways for them to engage with training, to volunteer if they need us to come in and do a speaking engagement, or to come in and train their community. We're going in and training churches, and we're training schools, and we're training homeschool co-ops, and we're training private schools. Any group, especially in the Missouri area, will come and do a training, an in-depth training. And then also we have an online training available for people, and we have resources and handouts. And on our resource page on our website, there's tons of downloadable guides that are free of charge. People can just go and download guides on grooming and these different aspects on how they can protect their children.
Again, that's empowerthefight.org.
Yes.
Katie Fetzer, thank you for the amazing work that you're doing. It's truly, I think, a ministry of God to help save the most innocent victims. Hey, folks, I know this was a tough topic to listen to today, but it's we're all in this together, and we've got to fight for our children. Thanks for joining us for Mark Alford's America. We'll talk again next week. Until then, remember, I believe in you. I believe, despite all the evil in this world, that our best days are still ahead of us. And Katie Fetzer, I believe in America.
Me too.